series of roundtables. The first one is relating to skills. I would like, first of all, to announce that the session is recorded and it's also broadcasted on ERF YouTube channel network. We have 4 panelists to discuss with us. So after the welcoming remarks by Dr. Ibrahim Al-Badawi and Ramiro Albrio, we will start giving about 20 minutes for each panelist. We start with Safa Al-Kougali from Washington, Dr. Hussam Badrawi from Badrawi Foundation, Ahmed Sayed Isa in Germany, and Adil bin Youssef from the University of Nice in France. After when speakers are going on, you can ask questions in the QR part. And after listening to all panelists, we can also open the floor to discussion to people who prefer maybe to intervene directly and ask questions directly to panelists. So is Dr. Ibrahim Badawi here? Can we start with his welcoming remarks?
I think he's yet to join us, Dr. Samir. So if we can,
we can start with Ramiro.
Yeah. Please.
Yeah. Ramiro, please. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thanks, Dr. Samir. Thanks for the invitation and thanks for being here in our series of dialogues on the future of work in the Global South. Now you are going to discuss about your region, but we had these previous discussions in Latin America, in Sub-Saharan Africa, and in Asia. We will have the same dialogue in the next weeks. So let me just share some of our ideas about our project, the future of work in the Global South, just to give you a little of a context about the discussions. I think that now you can see my screen. Wait 1 second. Yeah, so we have been working on the future of work in the Global South initiative for the last 3 or 4 years, trying to bring new data, new research on the future of work, but taking into account the specific features and structural characteristics of the Global South, right? But what we saw was that a global view about the future of work was gaining attention, you know, like a hegemonic or generalized view saying that against the fears of technological change, societies will manage just to bring new technologies, new skills, and increases in productivity and well-being, you know? In a way, when you now hear the debates on the future of work in the global arena, in international forum, in international organizations, you can check that this narrative is being really pervasive in a way. It's kind of gaining, you know, the floor. So in our project, we ask is if these narratives are representative of our own challenges and opportunities, in our background, our structural features, you know, our challenges, and so on. So we started this initiative trying to add context and diversity to global debates on the future of work. We have been working closely on the T20, you know, the C20, and the several fora, and we are now trying to add this flavor, you know, our own flavor to this debate. Of course, this goal implies more data, more research, but mainly, in a way, it's more important to compile what is out there, to systemize, you know, to find commonalities, differences, lessons to learn, and so on. That's why we started these dialogues where we gather experts just talking, you know, just giving their knowledge, their ideas to this collective effort to understand the future of work in our regions, with the goal of not to antagonize, not to create new policy frameworks totally different than the ones in the North, just to adapt what we know, just to adapt those narratives to our own context. That's why we are going to be discussing about different issues that are related to the future of work, because we understand that it's not only about technology, it's not only about skills or institutions, it's about trying to connect all these sets of knowledge, you know, all together. So we are going to be talking about technology, about skills, labor institutions, demography, and inequality, with the idea, again, to add elements to the global narrative. I'm just going to give you one example, and I'm going to leave it here. For example, regarding technology, in the North, the debates have to do with how to reform the curricula, you know, to add the 21st century skills. But in our countries, we need to do that. Plus, we need to make sure that schooling is learning, you know, that children and people are learning. And also we need to think that in order to implement new technologies, we need to adapt these technologies, and we need to check technologies in use, you know. So in a way, we believe that we can enrich the global debate through these webinars. So I just give the floor to the participants just to hear and learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Samir, Dr. Ibrahim has joined us.
Yes. He can.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. Ibrahim, how are you, Dr. Ibrahim?
Hello, Samir. How are you?
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Well, my apologies. Actually, there was a small glitch that I needed some help to be able to join you. I would like to welcome Ramiro and the rest of the panelists from our region, and to thank you for your time and for your availability to lead us in this very interesting project. And we really look forward to constructive and informative discussion. And this will actually, in addition, of course, to the great leadership and insightful, you know, presentations, several meetings before this one and this one by Ramiro and his colleagues. This will set the stage, hopefully, for concrete framework for moving forward with this project. So without further ado, just wanted to welcome you again and to listen and learn, and if need be, to make my own contribution in this conversation. Back to you, Samir.
Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. Let's start. So this session, the first question is addressed to Dr. Safa Al-Kougali. The MENA region has been expanding education attainment, but is it at risk of falling behind in knowledge and skills formation? Please, Dr. Safa.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Samir and ERF colleagues for inviting me to be part of this distinguished panel. As many of you know, nearly half of the population in the Middle East and North Africa is aged under 24. 1 in 5 people in the region are between the ages of 10 and 24. These adolescents and youth have the potential to become change makers by actively contributing to addressing the region's most pressing issues and to reaping the demographic dividend. But they face a lot of risks to unleash this potential, and they need access to opportunities to learn and develop skills to be able to have not just opportunities in the labor market, but to have a dignified living. Some of these obstacles, which are risks, are the conflicts and the crises that has taken a toll in many of these countries. More than 8,850 educational facilities, for example, in Syria, Iraq, Yemen, and Libya have been attacked and destroyed, leaving them incapable of hosting students for education purposes. There are also great gender inequalities in terms of access to education and the quality of education. Adolescent girls are 1.5 times more likely to be out of school in lower secondary education in the region, and 1 in 5 girls in the region are married before the age of 18. So this is still an area that poses a risk overall to countries. Then, of course, the main topic in terms of skills formation and the links to the labor market is the mismatch that we see between the skills learned and the requirements in the labor market. But one thing is certain: the ability for children to succeed in learning, especially the complex skills they will need in 2030 and beyond, is closely linked to their early learning experience. The only way to ensure our children will be prepared for the world they will enter as adults is to give them a strong start. In 2018, the education team at the World Bank raised the alarm bells around the level of learning poverty. We coined the term learning poverty, which not only has an impact on the work opportunities for future generations, but on economies of countries as a whole. Learning poverty measures the ability of children at age 10 to read and understand an age-appropriate text. The latest numbers for MENA show that 59% on average, 59% of children at age 10 cannot read and understand an age-appropriate text. Now, this number is brought down by some of the countries like UAE, Bahrain, Qatar, Iran, where about 1/3 of 10-year-old children are not able to read an age-appropriate text. But in countries like Kuwait and Jordan, it's more than half. It's around 51, 52% of children age 10 unable to read and comprehend an age-appropriate text. In Egypt, it's 70%, and in Yemen, it's 95%. So this is really scary when you think about reading, which is really the foundation to be able to learn as you proceed in life and to succeed. So why do we see this? Where are the risks? What is the problem? Well, children come unprepared to school. We find that early childhood development in the Middle East and North Africa has the lowest numbers compared to the rest of the world. In fact, for those at age less than 3, which is the time when the synapses of the brain grow the fastest, it is where a lot of studies show it has the highest return of investment at that critical age. Well, MENA is the lowest in the region. Even among 3 to 5-year-olds, the Middle East and North Africa, which is a middle income region, it does so much lower than other regions such as South Asia and Latin America. For example, in the Middle East and North Africa, early child preschool enrollment is at only 32%, whereas in South Asia, it's 62%, and in Latin America, it's 75%. Another issue, really, children are not able to read or learn or succeed, which is a risk, is the language of instruction. There is a gap between what children learn at home and what they learn at school, which is modern standard Arabic. And to be able to, that gap requires specific attention, requires kids are able to familiarize themselves with the modern standard Arabic, requires them to read in the classroom. But again, data shows that very less children than is necessary have access to books at their home or books in their schools. In fact, we found that, for example, 64% of Moroccan students and 55% of Saudi Arabian students at grade 4 never or almost never are asked to read fiction books with chapters during class. The focus is so much on the grammar and the structure that the ability to read then becomes challenged. Teachers themselves are not comfortable in reading that. And by the way, there's a new report that just came out at the World Bank on the issue of language of instruction in MENA, which I encourage you to look at. And I could later put the link on the chat for those who are interested. But then we also looked beyond the learning poverty. Really, what's holding back? Why is it, despite all the investment, still kids are not learning? The risks remain really great. And we came up with really what we refer to as tensions. And this is a report that I did with a few colleagues in 2018. And these tensions start with the focus on credentials and not skills. So what we see is a system where parents are demanding a diploma for their students. They don't care whether they learned or not. They just want to see that diploma. They graduated. And so the education system provides those diplomas. And so this, what Saleh Isfahani referred to as the credentials equilibrium, has been going on in MENA for a long time. This really, again, risks holding back learning skills that are needed in the labor market in the 21st century, so long as the focus is on diplomas. The second tension is the focus on discipline versus inquiry. Kids are just made to memorize information. They're not allowed to ask questions. Teachers spend a lot of the time in the classroom trying to discipline the classroom rather than ensure the kids are learning. And a third tension that we see is that of control and autonomy. There's so much centralization that if a teacher wants to look for ways to allow the child to learn, they're held back because you need to follow the curriculum as it is. It's a dense curriculum. You can't adapt it to a context. Imagine studying about snow in a village in Saudi Arabia. How would they? Well, there is snow in Saudi Arabia sometimes, as we've seen, but I mean, the context is so important, but teachers don't have the facilities and the space to be autonomous in terms of the way they teach. And the fourth and final tension that we saw was tradition and modernity. There is a lot of resistance to modernizing the way teachers teach, the way education is delivered. Everything is brought down to tradition. This is against our tradition. This is against our culture. And that will continue to hold back. That will continue to pose a great risk, I think, to learning and to skills development in the region. Now, over the last 2 years, we saw what the pandemic can do. And the risks now have a totally new dimension. If we think about school closures, who had access to online learning? A key risk is the inequality that we have now seen and that is actually had increased over the last 2 years. Those who are on the richer segments of society manage to either get tutors, to do online training or connect to online classrooms. Those who don't have that access fell behind. They lost at least a year of education, if not more. But also, we spoke about early childhood development. Children cannot be 3 or 2 years anymore. They're now 4 and 5. And so we missed that important window of opportunity of investments at that age during that year. And catching up is going to be even harder, but catching up will be necessary. And then I wanted to speak on technology. I mean, the world has gone digital and we remain pretty much analog in the MENA region. Students, where technology is being introduced, it's usually a tablet, and teachers are not trained sufficiently on how to use that if they have access to it. And so I think the technology gap is going to be really, really critical and a key risk for the region unless we address that in a smart way, where teachers are taught how to use it. It won't be possible to catch up with the aspirations of the region, let alone with the rest of the world. So these are some, and one final actually risk is the financing of education. Given a lot of the countries now have constraints in terms of their budgets due to the pandemic, we've seen that expenditure on education is going down in a lot of countries around the world. And so that also creates a risk because you have children who are still out of school. You have quality inputs that are necessary for school. So unless we secure the sufficient financing for education, I think the risks are going to continue to be great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Dr. Safa. Let's move to listen to Dr. Hussein Badrawi. He will speak about the obstacles to achieving better learning in the MENA region. Please, Dr. Hussein.
Thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this dialogue. Before I start, I would like to comment on an article written by Dr. Taha Hussein, 1939, in his marvelous book about the future of education and culture in Egypt. He wrote, and I quote, that overcoming illiteracy is not by reading and writing. It's reading, writing, and understanding. Because if we teach our kids to read and write without understanding, they will be soldiers for those who understand. They can move them anywhere. And I think it's still work now. And Safa mentions lots of scary statistics about the knowledge of reading and writing and understanding. Going to my points here, I would like to say that there is no education in any nation that goes above the standard of their teachers. The teacher is the top that we can reach for. And I think this is a very important issue. The real obstacle that we face is our kids are more technologically capable than their teachers. And if there is no real work to upgrade teachers to the level of education that we are looking for, it is impossible for our kids to develop. Most of our kids across the world, MENA region, Africa, whatever, if we give them a little bit of freedom, they are literate, they are digitally literate. They are born digital. And in my mind, with the 2 years of COVID, the most important investment that should be done is to make internet available in each home, in each village. Kids, young kids will be able to use it. Then we come to the obstacle that we're looking for. The obstacle is if we leave them to use the technology without supervision, it may lead to disasters too. So Who are supervising? These are the teachers. We cannot depend now on parents at home because most of them are ignorant about that. We're not talking about the upper level of the society where every kid is having literate parents. But the majority of the problem is in the poor areas where parents need also education. That takes us to the responsibility of the states, not only to kids, but to their teachers and their families. Here comes the role of media, and here comes the role of PRs and the programs by using the television, which is the main source of information in poor areas. Let me talk about 5 skills needed to be taken in consideration for the future of this area. It is not how much you know, it's how much you can adapt. It's working with a group. It's the communication skills. And at the same time, how to develop leadership. Societies cannot work without leadership. And these are the kids present in our schools today, in our universities today. Of course, I'm not mentioning the digitalization because it becomes obvious that if you're not digital, you're not part of the whole world or the future. So digitalization is being taken in these areas from the hardware point of view. As Dr. Safat mentioned, distributing computers or laptops or iPads is not the solution. The solution is in the soft part that makes this going on, that makes the child digital in his understanding, digital in the way he gets his information, and digital in expressing himself. So yes, the main obstacle that we have is human development of teachers and efforts to work with parents. We cannot leave them to negatively affect their kids as looking for the certificate or the shahada, and that's it. To be adapted and to be digital and to be capable of facing the future needs a personality. That is another major obstacle. As our schools across the board does not work on personality development. It is not the curriculum. Again, it's the interaction with teachers in the presence of art, sports that build the personality. If we look only to curricula or to digitalization without the part related to building up the personality, creating the conscious person about his country and about humanity, we may have the best doctor and the best teacher and the best engineer, and they go to Daesh and kill others. There are a lot to be done in creating environment, building the personality. I think this is the major obstacle that we're facing. The resistance is from within. The resistance is from not having the capable teacher, not according to the old standards, but according to the future standards of understanding how to give freedom to the kids and how to make dialogue and be able to communicate. And in the presence of an environment in schools and universities to build up their personalities. Let me talk about one other obstacle, and I will finish here. The everybody is looking at education from the curricular point of view, teacher point of view, presence, availability of places. But we're not talking about a very important issue. Management of education is as important as providing education. Management, I mean, proper management of the education system, particularly in countries with large population like Egypt. Management is very important. Its schools should be independent, should be autonomous, and any school director with 2,000 students and 100 teachers is like a small factory. He should be able to make repair and maintenance and training, and you should have an HR. This doesn't happen. Everything is run centrally in our countries. And actually, schoolmasters are not even prepared to manage schools according to the digital era. So to summarize, it's all about human development, teachers, managers, and even working with parents in poor areas. Second, that the output of education is not how much they know, it's how flexible they will be, how adaptable they will be, how ready they will be to get new knowledge and new skills. Third, which is very important too, is availability of activities within the schools, which does not exist in most of the poor countries. And this is the music, the art, the competitive sports, and living within the school environment is important, very important in building the personality. I should add from my experience, one important thing is that availing one meal and school day can add a lot to education and health at the same time. And keep kids at school and push families to send their kids in poor area to school. So as I said, importance of having internet, importance of giving a hot meal to kids at school to keep them capable of continuing being in school and support their families in this area. I know these obstacles is easy to mention. The issue is how to solve it. And how to solve it is a decision to be taken and should be sustained. Meaning that policies in education should not be changing every now and then. Change in education happens gradually, with sustainability, with unknown objectives. It takes years to achieve what we want. It is not the matter of building a school or graduating a teacher that does not fit the job. It's a matter of knowing exactly what do we want from our kids as they graduate. This takes me to the major obstacle, which is a priority of the political system. Nothing happens without political commitment. And to have political commitment in education needs that our political leaders to be educated at the first place. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. We have, in fact, two interrelated questions to Dr. Ahmed Said. First one, which are the necessary abilities for the future of work? And then, are there mechanisms to deliver them at 3 levels? The early childhood one, the formal education one, and the adult learning one. Please, Dr. Ahmed, the floor is yours.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Dr. Samir. I don't promise that I can go through all these questions, but I'm going to share like some thoughts across the topic of the link between education and the labor market, with a particular focus on Egypt, the case of Egypt. And I'm going to put this in a historical perspective, discussing what has been the case with education in the country over the years, and where we stand right now in terms of like, the mismatches between skills and the labor market, and what are the possible ways of trying to bridge these gaps. So after the 1952 revolution in Egypt, and between the time period 1950s till 1980s, as most of the attendees here at this seminar would know, that public sector was the main employer in the Egyptian labor market, and this was part of the social contract, entailing expanding the umbrella of free education to all levels. And more importantly, as part of the social contract, is that the government would guarantee employment for all graduates from secondary education and onwards. So in theory, everyone who would pass the next threshold after compulsory education, which is like the secondary education, would automatically guarantee a place in the public sector, right? This was the case actually back then. So this resulted in several consequences. First of all, education, which back then was theoretically free, has become more popular over the years, up to the level of achieving this diploma, achieving this degree, which is the main and even the only gate for employment. Coupled with a massive population growth that the country witnessed over the years, and the overcrowdedness at schools, because this policy has made education more appealing, but this didn't come together with matching public expenditure in education or extensive construction of schools at the basic and secondary level of education. This resulted in overcrowdedness, so that to be able to accommodate students into the mainstream education, most of the public schools have run on a daily shift basis. Some children would go in the morning, some in the afternoon, and even in some extreme cases, some would go in the evening for the schools that run on a 3-day shift basis. Up to this point, improving education quality and providing children with the skills needed for the labor market was not a policy priority at all, because matter of fact, for the local labor market, there were no skills required per se, right? This, of course, had negative implications for the functioning of the labor market and the ability of the labor market to allocate human resources to the most productive use. The focus instead of the public policy of education back then was to deal with this overflow of kids entering school. And therefore, the government came up with different policies in this regard. One of them was to expand school construction, but as I just mentioned, this was not to an extent that's equivalent to the increase in the number of kids, right? Also, they came with some weird policies, like in 1988, for example, the Ministry of Education came with a policy reform that cut years of schooling from 9 years to 8 years, which is the opposite of what most countries would have done and would do right now. Most of these countries would increase years of schooling because we know that education is important, not only for the labor market, but also on different other domains. What happened in Egypt is to cut the costs. They came up with this idea of cutting years of schooling from 9 years of compulsory schooling to 8 years. And actually this has been reversed recently in 2003. So now it's back again to the 9 years of schooling. Also for the higher education, there has been expansion. So the public policy back then, especially in the 1960s and 1970s, was to construct a public university in each governorate or province. And we evaluated in one paper the impact of this policy, and we found positive impact on the labor market outcomes, of course, and also marriage outcomes, particularly for women. So most of these actually policies in the education sphere, what happens there is women are benefiting much more, mainly because of strong preference for sons. Usually families would invest more in the education of their sons, more than daughters, because the common belief that my son is going to support me at old age, my daughter is getting married and leaving the household. So whenever you have a policy that's gender neutral, most of the time, women are benefiting much more. In this regard, Egypt is no exception. So the expansion of education in the region had comparable results. So another paper from Jordan by Raghi Asad and Mohammed Saleh in 2019 shows that the expansion of school construction in Jordan has positive impacts on intergenerational mobility for the two genders, but the impact was much more pronounced for girls. Again, up to this point, the link between reaching a certain level of education and guaranteeing a job in the public sector was there, and skills didn't play a big role, right? So what happened from 1990s onwards is that the policy started to change, and the public sector was no longer able to absorb graduates. It became overstaffed, extremely inefficient, and therefore a new set of labor market policy reforms that aimed at cutting public employment and initiating privatization programs came into play. And at this point, the intention and the hope of the public policy was that the private formal sector would take the role of the public employment in absorbing the graduates and create sufficient number of jobs for those new entrants to the labor market. However, this sector, despite growing fast, has remained small in size and couldn't meet this goal. This change in the employment policy had implications. First, popularity of education remained enacted or even increased, although employment in the public sector is no longer an option, right? Mainly because a social norm has been created and formed that reaching education threshold has been linked to gaining social status or as a signal in the marriage market, particularly for women, right? So education became more popular, and waves of graduates who are not sufficiently qualified because the education has never been designed to equip those kids with skills, they would come to the labor market lacking any kind of skills that the labor market would need. Also, on the demand side, there was no sufficient demand from firms because the private sector was not developed enough at creating employment opportunities and absorbing those new graduates. So what happened then to those new entrants? They were left with two options, either to remain unemployed or not join the labor force. And this was pretty much the road for girls, or to go for the informal employment, which is characterized by low quality and low paying jobs, which was mainly the choice for boys. So there are a couple of studies by Jackie Wahba, which shows that, especially for the highly educated, informal employment was usually the first step into entering the labor market as a stepping stone towards finding a better employment. Over time, this sector, which is mostly informal, consisted mainly of very large, small and medium enterprise firms, with less than 2% of firms have more than 10 employees and less than 0.2% have more than 50 employees. So you're talking about a labor market that consists mainly of small and medium enterprises that are typically informal. This sector has been extremely crowded with a combination of highly educated and low educated people competing in a sort of low quality jobs that do not guarantee rights. So no minimum wage, no health insurance, no social safety, nothing, right? Even worse, it doesn't create much value to economy, right? So the overall outcome of this is lost talent. Talented people are concentrated in low quality jobs while they could work in jobs that would better match their abilities. Why this is a case? Mainly combination of two sides. As economists, we tend to think about supply and demand, right? So we have the supply issue and the demand side and the supply side. The demand side, as I just mentioned, there are no sufficient big firms that would absorb this talent and provide those young people with jobs that would fit their profile, right? Probably they're not skilled, but they have the potential. They have, reached a higher level of education that would enable them to learn skills. On the other hand, you have the supply side, which is pretty much lack of skills needed in the labor market, which the education system failed to provide. So the assumption here would be that providing people with those skills needed in the labor market right now could help them get into a track of joining the labor market and get better jobs and become economically more empowered. Usually across the world, skills training programs are the most commonly used active labor market policies to provide young people with these skills. And this has been the case over the last few decades. These training programs come in different shapes and forms, but we can classify them mainly into two types: vocational training, which is pretty much focusing on providing people with the technical skills needed for a particular job. And this can be offered in a short period of time, right? This is the most commonly used type by governments and NGOs. And the second type is business skills training, reflecting to what Dr. Hassan mentioned about communication skills. This focuses on the type of managerial skills, financial skills, marketing, time management, and this kind of soft skills. And then you have also a combination of those two types on different types of trainings, plus different forms of support, like, for example, wage subsidies, so to encourage employers to hire people. You have matching services to help employers and employees find each other, etc. The question is, to what extent this type of programs is successful in getting those people into the labor market, into high quality jobs, etc. David McKenzie from the World Bank has a couple of meta-analysis papers analyzing the impact of these type of programs globally. And unfortunately, he shows that the effect is very modest. Modest in the sense that on average, less than 3 people would get employed with the help of these programs compared to out of 100, compared to a situation where the program is not available, right? So it's really small effect. Also, another negative side of those, especially for the programs that focus on wage employment, is displacement effect. So the positive impact could be at the expense of other people losing jobs because you're not creating jobs. It's pretty much like, you are switching people who were employed and then, you're replacing them with others who were not employed. From our region, from the MENA region, there are only 2 studies that focus on the impact evaluation of this kind of trainings. One by David McKenzie, Grow, and others in 2016, focusing on Jordan, and shows that female community college graduates in the country, when offered kind of an intensive soft skills training program that lasts for 45 hours and taught by a well-regarded provider, they didn't show any significant impact in terms of positive labor market outcomes, even after 2 years. Another paper was by Chepa Almena, where we studied the impact of kind of a bundled services, like a bundle of services, including vocational training, business skills training, and capital support to women. The majority of them are vocational secondary school graduates, but they do not work. Those women were randomly assigned to treated and control groups. And after up to 4 years, we found that treated women are more likely to join the labor market, have higher earnings, and become more economically and socially empowered. So this provides strong evidence for the possibility of skills training programs into getting graduates, especially women, on track for positive labor market outcomes. But the question now is, would this be sufficient? Most likely no, and the intervention needs to take place earlier at the levels of education curriculum, and linking it to the needs of the labor market, and aiming towards graduating entrepreneurs who would create job opportunities instead of the current system, which produces job seekers, often with insufficient and inadequate skills. The evidence we have from Egypt on the quality of vocational formal education is suggestive of low quality of this type of education in the country. A paper by Caroline Kraft in 2017 compares the returns of formal vocational secondary education to the returns of joining the labor market without formal education. And she shows no significant difference between the two, suggesting that there is a huge waste of resources by not improving the quality of formal vocational education. So there's no point for sending kids then to school. The bigger question would be then, is it sufficient to increase the supply of high-skilled graduates by providing them with the skills, either at formal education system or by providing them with the trainings? Matter of fact, no, because demand of labor is low, right? You would create a model of exporting skill. So you provide people with the skills and they do not have a place in the labor market. So migration among the high-skilled would increase. And we see this actually across different developing countries. You have very advanced education system, or you have like a training program that provides people with super nice skills, and then you are just sending them to advanced countries. So what could be the solution then? And I'll be quick. Policies that enable people with entrepreneurial talent and skill to start and grow firms should be encouraged, like big push investments. 2 examples of those policies, which we have some empirical evidence on, are first, opening the door and encouraging multinational corporations And we show evidence from recent paper and the data set that we have put together, covering all developing countries. We show positive correlations between the intensity of multinational corporations in a region and youth employment, particularly in Africa. So if you have like this job opportunity, then training people is not a waste of resources because you know that they are going to find employment in their countries. Another example is to invest in the information and communication technology. A paper by Hort and Paulson in 2019 shows that the arrival of fast internet in Africa increased employment rates and raised the average income on the continent due to the impact of the technology on firm entry, productivity, and export. Now, the investment in this type of big push policies require financial resources, which are typically not available in the low-income country. What should governments do then? Jensen, in a new paper in American Economic Review, it's forthcoming in an American Economic Review, shows that improving the tax collection and enforcement capacity is the best option to secure these resources for developing countries. This capacity in itself is a function of development because the transition from self-employment, pretty much formal employment, to wage employment, like manifested in the big firms, provides information trails that would help governments increase the tax base and improve the ability to collect taxes. And I'll stop here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. We continue with the mechanisms to deliver ability with Dr. Adel Ben Youssef. Now, we'd like to know whether these mechanisms are being implemented. Otherwise, what are the obstacles? And are they effective? Or what are the issues? And I think Dr. Adel would like to speak a little about the necessary abilities for the future of work before maybe responding to these two questions. Dr. Adel, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you very much, Dr. Samir. Thank you for inviting me for this session. It's my pleasure to be here and to deliver this talk, but it's just sharing about my thought rather than academic presentation. So first, I would like to highlight this question of skills and their link with the technological change, especially the digitalization of the economy. One of my friends is Dr. Cristiano Antonelli, distinguished between what we call the size of the technological change and the direction of the technological change. What we call the size is the depth of the technological change. We have so many new technology today, and everyone can agree about this is very, very important technological change. But at the same time, we need to have in mind that there are people behind this technological change who are guiding this technological change to solve problems. Let me give you just one highlight. Before we have this kind of software, you know, the software where, for example, the Microsoft suite, we have them in early 2000. Everyone in our region, in MENA region, can have a copy for a few dinars or a few money, and we have even these softwares for econometrics, whatever. They were very costly in the Western countries, but we can get them for a few dinars in our regions. And how they have solved this problem? They have solved this problem by the innovation of the cloud computing. The protection will come with the cloud computing. So the cloud computing came in order to resolve a problem. The problem is the absence of the proprietary rights and the inability to protect some of the invention by proprietary rights. So this is what we call the direction of the technological change. That means that some of these technologies can be directed, can be changed in order that it fits better with some categories of people or some countries and not in other countries. And these technologies, the digital transformation, the digital technologies, they are skill-based technology. That means that they are benefiting for the most skilled people, and they are not benefiting for the lowest skilled people. That means that these technologies are dual. They may create competition with the low skilled people, and they may benefit or accelerate the returns, the wages for the high skilled people. Keeping this in mind, that means that we are creating here, by introducing this technology, we may create more and more inequality, and we need to have this in mind when we deal with this. Let me go now to my speech. There are several waves of technology arriving since 3 decades. We are now about the fifth wave of technology, which is called the Industry 4.0. This fifth wave include artificial intelligence, 3D printing, augmented reality, virtual reality, blockchain, etc., robots, whatever. And previously, we have made some works within the ERF describing how these waves of technology are arriving and what they are doing in the labor market. And as this technology arrives, we have a need for more transversal skills. That means that we are not needing only specific skills, we are needing for transversal skills. That means that the part of identical skills required in all branches of sectors is increasing. And we estimate in some parts of the world that these identical skills may represent between 60 and 70% of the jobs. That means that we need to be aware that preparing students for these identical skills is key. But we need to identify them. What are these identical skills? And what are the link with this technological change and the digitalization especially? We have at least, let me just, we have worked on this area and we distinguish 4 layers of skills. These skills need to be at the heart of the educational system. The first one is what we call the basic ICT skills. It's the ability to use a computer, the possibility to reinstall software, the ability to use electronic devices, connected object, whatever. This is called instrumental skills. And these instrumental skills need to be mastered by everybody. This is the basic knowledge that everyone needs to have. Not only people attending schools, but every citizen, but especially people in the second layer, and which is very, very important, is the skills related to data management and security. That means that we need to form people with basic knowledge about structure of information in the digital world. This is very important because in the digital world, we have diversity of information sources. We need to manage our identity. We need to have knowledge about security, safety, legal aspect, etc. And these are becoming increasingly difficult to master. That's why we need to have specific programs, and they need to be included in the education system. So the information skills, the ability to research through a research engine, the ability to find the required information, the ability to understand the sources of the information is very important. And this is the second layer. The third one, and this is very important because we have Dr. Safa, Dr. Hussein also have mentioned them, is the problem solving and communication. Because these technology are making as interacting with a lot of people. So we need to solve problems, but with the others. We need to cooperate. We need to collaborate. We need to share with others. So cooperation is becoming one of these skills, but also communication, and also the creativity and emotional intelligence skills and what. These skills are becoming increasingly very important, and we need to put it in them in the core of our educational system. In our works, we have made we think that there are two specific skills here within the level 3. The problem solving is very important. As artificial intelligence is becoming increasing in present in our life, we need to resolve more and more complex problems. This is our really advantage. So we need to learn for our students, for our pupils, how to solve problems within the school. But also we need to help them to be critical. This critical thinking is very important. And critical thinking is one of the lacking ability and skills in our educational model. Finally, we have another layer which is not linked at all with the digital skills, which is soft skills. We need the general program of soft skills for all the education population. That's mean active learning, curiosity, communication, collaboration, whatever. Leadership, Dr. Hussein said about leadership, negotiation, resilience, time management skills, all these are important. So the question is how to put all these skills in our educational system. And here, and unfortunately, I think that in MENA region, we are not fully equipped with the soft and digital skills due to non-appropriate education system. So I think that the education system is more focused on preparing people for specific tasks, a specific way of thinking, specific outcomes, and not for this holistic approach of how to prepare people to be in phase with these digital transformations. I identify at least 5 problems that need to be solved. The first is to modernize curricula. The curricula are not modernized enough. So we need to adapt them permanently. And this is not done. First, we are not integrating ICT skills in an appropriate way. Second, we have not critical thinking as the basic stone in our education model. We need to put critical thinking in as a basic stone. Third, I think that we need the update of the curricula need to be more. The second is the lack of autonomy of teachers. The teachers are the vector of the change. If they have not the ability to make this change, even if they have the desire to make this change, if they have the ability to do, they cannot do it because they are lacking a lot of autonomy. Lacking because they are constrained by their principles, they are constrained by the systems, they are constrained by the program, and so in their decision making, they have not enough responsibility. And I think that way of changing this is to provide more autonomy to teachers and to provide also them with more ICT skills and more generally these new skills. The third one is the national system. We need a holistic approach. What are the skills that are needed? How to divide them between the different levels, and what kind of skills we need to develop at which moment. We have not this holistic vision of, especially, and how this holistic vision need to be changed due to the rapid evolution of the technology. During the 20 last years, we have 5 waves of technologies happening. So that means that you need at least to have a change in your national system vision, objectives, strategies at least 5 times in order to be in phase with this technology. This was not happening. The 4th one is TVET malfunctioning. We need the reconsideration of the TVET system. TVET system is not for failing people. TVET system is for brilliant people who want to be specialized in specific. For example, we have not a specific TVET system, TVET now system for immersion technology, for robot, for Internet of Things, for blockchain. We are lacking these skills nowadays, but the TVET are not preparing people for this thing. And when you look at, for example, the German TVET system, they have put the accent that the industry 4.0, most of the skills are prepared at the TVET level, not at the university level. And this is very important too. And the 4th one is under development of lifelong career guidance. You know, with this technology, we need to prepare people that they will change from a job to another job at least 2, 3, 4, 5 times. They are not going to have a job for all their life. And this is a new way of preparing people. That means that we need a career guidance for how they can change, how they can move from a job to another. And again, I recall here, they will need the 67% of the skills which are transversal. These transversal skills, they can take them from a job to another. So this is a new way of considering. When I was at the African Development Bank, we have a reflection about the new education model for Africa, but I think that the same reflection can be for the MENA regions about the skills of the 21st century. And we have 6 directions. The first one is securing greater participation of education stakeholders. That means that we cannot make your education system without considering the other stakeholders, private sector, parents, the association, NGOs, all the ecosystem need to be considered in your education system. And our education system mainly is made at the ministry level without considering the other stakeholders. The second one is linking education with the labor markets, but I'm not going to say what Dr. Ahmed have said about this, and I think that he's right. The third one is public-private partnership. We are seeing that in most of our countries, there are a dual system. The dual system is we have public education and private education. And private education are struggling and not cooperating together. We need really a cooperation between public and private and partnership in order to have better education outcomes. The fourth one is ICT use in education. We need really to have a strategy for ICT use, because ICT in information communication technologies, the meaning of it differs from one to another. And when I'm discussing about ICT, I'm discussing about what will do the artificial intelligence, how to deal with the artificial intelligence today in my curricula, how to deal with blockchains, how to deal with Internet of Things, how to deal with the robots. They are already in our everyday life. So how to integrate them in the education system? It's not only about internet and the connection. It's not only about e-education. It's not this. It's another way. It's how to take these last waves of technology and to put them in the education system. The fifth one, the recommendation, is critical thinking as central skills. We need to reconsider all the program by critical thinking. We are lacking critical thinking in our education system. And we need people to think. We need people to solve problems. We need people to challenge things, not to accept everything, not just to read books and to put what they are in the books to have a good mark. Finally, the last one, if we need that our education system succeed, we need accountability and transparency. We need to have really targets. We need to have outcomes, and we need to see, and we need to be accountable as a teacher, as education system, as institution. We need to be accountable to the society, what we have done, what are our outcomes, how we have increased this, and we need to be transparent. And I will finish with this, and thank you very much for giving me the floor.
Thank you very much, Adil. Thank you all the panelists. I think we have some questions. The first one, in fact, I see 5 questions. The first one from Nairobi. Welcome Nairobi, Dr. Saifuddin Abdulrahman. Adil, do you see the questions? I think the first one is to you. Adil, do you see the questions?
I'm trying to see.
Section.
I'm trying to see, yeah, but if you can read it, it's better. But I'm
yes. The first one, I think it's to you. In fact, all the questions come from Dr. Saifuddin, I think. The first one, in fact, the opposite is true. I don't know the opposite of what. With respect to relationship between technology and level of skills, particularly in financial services in Kenya, has helped the low skills people by enabling them easy access. And he said that he can elaborate more on this. After this, I see another question. Due to broad base of technology and customization, technology widely used in money transfer through mobile money and Visa, which has significantly created multiple effects in the economy. The third idea, the immediate effect of mobile money has put banking system to adjust and become more efficient. However, now we have reached a level where even the informal sector business has been upgraded and access to money has become more easier. Next, the shift of the business has dramatically shifted from banking system to communication companies has become intermediate financial transfer hub. It's a game changer. And last, immediate effects. I think it's all the ideas proposed by Dr. Saifuddin. Welcome again to Nairobi. And I assume that all these points are addressed to Adil. It's right? But Dr. Ahmed,
I will try just to
can speak about now. We have no problem.
I will try to address one of them and give my general thought about mobile money and this innovation and the skills. I think that what the participant, please, can you recall me the name of who has posed the question? Samir.
What?
Who has posed the question?
Dr. Saifuddin Abdurrahman from Nairobi, Kenya.
Okay. Dr. Saifuddin, what he is referring to is true. These mobile money, and especially the system M-Pesa invented in Kenya, was invented by Kenyan people for Kenyan people. So that means that the direction of the innovation is directly to low-skilled people, and it's for everybody. So he is right, because we invented a system which required low skills or basic skills in order to facilitate their life and to facilitate the transfer of money, etc. But this is true just for this kind of innovation. But if you look for the other innovation, they are not addressed by Kenyan people for Kenyan people. Most of this technology are invented in the West, invented in the Silicon Valley, most of them, and they are not invented in a way that they will benefit for everyone. And we need to be aware of this. This is what the point that I have made. And that's what we call the direction. For example, if you have a country with high-skilled people and you want to protect them from the other, you can invent technology which fits better with these high-skilled people, not for low-skilled people. And this is the theory of defensive innovation developed by Tony Verdier in the American Economic Review. I can share with you the reference, who have elaborated on this. That's the ICTs are not technology that can benefit everyone. They create inequalities. There are some basic things that we can share, basic, innovation for everyone. But most of them are very specific, and they are creating inequality. So if this technology, you can create them by yourself, or you adapt them by yourself for your own population, you can address these challenges. But when you take them as they are, and you adapt them to your local country, you can have these biases. And this is what I would like to highlight by my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw 6 questions, but now it's dropped out. I don't know where is it?
It's in the answered questions.
Resolved. So resolved. Okay. Now,
Dr. Samir, you've got Dr. Ibrahim Badawi raising hand, so he'd like the floor.
Yes, please. Yes, he can intervene. Yes, please, Dr. Ibrahim.
Thank you, Dr. Samir. I just want to follow. Can you hear me well? Can you hear me?
Yes, good.
I just want to follow on Dr. Saif, questions, because I think the case of Kenya will figure out very prominently for the component that our sister organization, the African Economic Research Consortium, is organizing. But it's a very important case for us to study. People, for example, leading scholars like Darona Simoglu, they warned against automation, but then they also argue that nations and governments, they do have the option to build policies around automation to ensure that at least their labor saving impact could be contained. In the case of Kenya, if you think about the financial industry that is built around cash transfers using mobile money, and we think about it in a narrow sense, you would argue that well, they are going to replace traditional banking sectors and going to send many employees in the banking sector, jobless and so on. But in the contrary, as Dr. Saif suggested, it actually revolutionized the economy of Kenya because it created huge impact on the SMEs in terms of financial inclusion and also women. And it is a kind of technology that enfranchises, low-skilled, public or agents in the economy. And I remember we had a conversation in a context of a webinar, and there was a fellow, I forgot his name, but he was a former minister of finance from Tunisia. And apparently he studied this phenomenon. He said that Tunisia would need at least 5 years to reach the stage where Kenya now. And he cited one of the main reasons is political economy, that the banking sector is, I stand to be corrected, but that's what I understood from him. Banking sector lobby in Tunisia is very powerful. And they have actually impeded the progress in terms of mobile money transfers and so on. And so this presented some political economy problems. In the case of Kenya, the governor of the central bank, the former governor, actually has been a champion in the government, pushing very hard for the adoption of cash transfers through mobile money. So I think this is a good example whereby you will have a technology that might have replaced some workers, but then created considerable activities and jobs, including in the rural communities and women, and even there is 2 big data companies in Nairobi that are actually exploiting the data to sell information about SMEs to the banking sector. So it's quite a notable experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Ibrahim. Now, participants can ask questions directly if you want by raising hand. If you have some questions to panelists. I think there is no questions.
We've got a hand raised by Dr. Saifuddin.
I don't see that.
He's in the attendees and he's now, he can have the floor.
Thank you very much. Thanks for all the panelists. I think the topic is very relevant and very interesting. In fact, this is for the first time that Barclays Bank has said that it is first time that we can take an innovation from Africa to the developed countries through this mobile transfer experience. In fact, in Kenya, we reach, because your mobile number, in fact, now is your banking number, we reached to the point that 2 commercial banks, for example, Equity, KCB banks, you can get, for those who are working in the informal sector, you can get the loan in the morning and you send the money back around 5, 6 before PM. So you can get loan day by day, even on those kind of the business is very small, and it has really revolutionized the financial sector in the country by creating multiplier effects. And that, what I want to say is simple, is that technology maybe kills some few jobs, but creating more opportunity in the context. But the most important things, what we have seen in the Kenya experience now, is how you customize it, how to make it relevant to your context in the country. Now, because the transactions cost has become very minimal due to the transactions cost, even the insurance company has benefited. Now in Kenya, you cannot go for the insurance company. Everything is online. You receive even your license, everything. So you can see how the technology making more efficiency. I believe that the political economy, as referred by Dr. Ibrahim, is a major challenge and impeding, and also how the progressive mindsets within the policymakers that can really making the country as a game changer in introducing those technology, because there will be a very big fight between shifting the business from the financial traditional banking sector to the communication sector, which is playing significant role on those. So there will be some shift, and that shift requires a very strong leadership, in my view, in the country. And that's what I want to just to comment on. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Saifuddin. I think since we have another session in few minutes, many thanks to all participants, to our panelists, and to Dr. Ibrahim to be here with us today. And I can close the session. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.